On the seats that Democrats are trying to flip, there are quite a few. Hillary Vaughn in Orange County, California, on how some winner-take-all primaries could leave some Democrats flipping out. And Fox Business Network's Connell McShane in Iowa on if the president's trade policies could be a big flop for Republicans. We begin with Hillary.
Hi, Neil. Well, national Democrats tell me this California primary is make or break, and voting is underway right now in Huntington Beach, California, one of the districts Democrats poured millions of dollars into. They have been counting on a blue wave hitting California to add to their tally of seats. They want to flip across the country to secure the House majority in November. But national Democrats tell me they are worried they could be left off the ballot entirely because too many of them are running. So the DCCC has had to dump millions of dollars into races, ask candidates to get out of the race, but still they are worried that it won't be enough. They are targeting 10 races in the state, 4 right here in Orange County, 2 open seats from Republican representatives retiring, Darrell Issa and Ed Royce, but they are also targeting 2 seats that Republican incumbents are trying to hold on to, Congressman Rohrabacher and Mimi Walters. Here's why. Because these 4 districts voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, so Democrats saw an opening they want to use for their advantage in 2018.
I'm up against 2 millionaires, and we know that there are billionaires who are financing most of what the Democratic Party does. So the public's going to wake up to that, and it's not in the interest of hardworking people to support some political clique that is trying to basically control the state and control their lives. I am very confident, and the Republican Party is about ready to surge back in California as compared to this blue wave that we're being told is coming.
Here in Huntington Beach, Rohrabacher is not only fending off Democrats, but also a fellow Republican in this primary. Republican Scott Baugh is close friends with Rohrabacher, but he is also fighting for his seat. He says it's good for Republicans because if they are the 2 that face off in November, that would leave Democrats off the ballot entirely. You're challenging Rohrabacher, a fellow Republican. So what I want to know is, how do you think that actually helps Republican on primary night today?
Well, are you kidding me? If the Republicans have 2 in the playoffs, 2 in the general election, it means that this seat is removed from the Democrat calculation altogether. They can't win this seat. It's impossible because they don't have a candidate in the general elections.
A Democratic lockout could be a huge nightmare for Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who has said the pathway to victory for them runs through California right here. But I talked to Democratic candidates that they have handpicked, and they are still not ready to vocalize their support for a potential Speaker Pelosi run if the Democrats were successful to win the majority in November. Neil?
All right, Hillary Vaughn, thank you very, very much. To put California and some of these other states in perspective, California and New Jersey alone have 12 Republican seats now held that could easily flip. That is about half the number that Democrats would need alone to regain control of the House of Representatives. That's how much is at stake in just 2 prominent states. But that's not all that's up for grabs. Fox Business Network's Deirdre Bolton keeping track of some of the toss-up races and issues that could have a huge impact.
Yeah, Neil, there is a lot. So California is so important. And I mean, experts are really saying these primaries are going to be potentially make or break contests for both parties. So here is the short list, the ones that we're really focused on in the Golden State. So the 10th congressional district, the incumbent there, Republican Jeff Denham, that is his photo there. Now, in the 2016 presidential election, Secretary Clinton beat President Trump by 3 percentage points in that district. So another one that we're following, the 25th congressional district, the incumbent there, Republican Steve Knight. And if you go back to the presidential election, you had a 7 percentage point gain by the Democrats. And that was, of course, Hillary Clinton versus President Trump. In California's 48th congressional district, incumbent there, Republican Dana Rohrabacher, there is his photo there. And if you go back to the presidential election, it's only a 2 percentage point lead that Hillary Clinton had over President Trump. Immigration, that is one of the most volatile issues for all of these races that may motivate voters to show up. California is home to more immigrants, legal, undocumented, than any other state in the U.S. It's a huge issue there. Also, of those 3 key races that we highlighted, they are all ones that have sanctuary city status. So people are very clear, either on one side or the other, particularly about illegal immigration. Other big issue that may motivate California voters is the threat of trade wars. So California grows tons of almonds, beans, milk, pork, some of which is exported. California as a whole produces and sells more than $15 billion worth of agricultural products. Now, in that 10th congressional district, all by itself, more than $2.5 billion of goods are sold there. So one of our 50 states, of course, California, but as a standalone country, I like this trivia point, it would be the world's 6th largest economy. Neil, you mentioned those 3 states in New Jersey. And of course, one of the things that the Republicans are going to be fighting against are the Trump administration's tax plans, which hurt a lot of real estate owners and real estate investors in New Jersey. There are a lot of people pretty bitter about that. And some calls I made, they said, listen, if you're independent, if you're on the line, that actually may help Democrats, if for no other reason than revenge of what people feel in their own pockets. For what that's worth.
Their deductions were dramatically limited.
Yes.
All right, Dieter, thank you very, very much. In the meantime, will the economy trump fears of a trade war in today's primaries? Let's get the read from Colin McShane, who's been talking to farmers out in Iowa. USA Today's congressional reporter Eliza Collins and the Wall Street Journal's Shelby Holliday. Colin, out there in farmland, of course, they're surprised, big backers of Donald Trump in general, but concerned about a trade war that could have the Chinese not buying a lot of the stuff they produce, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting on this very program yesterday, as you remember, Neil, we had a farmer named Ron Heck on the show from here in Iowa, and he was talking about some of the concerns. But what I will say after spending a couple of days out here on the ground, and this is just anecdotal, speaking to Heck and some others this morning at a Dubuque diner about this very subject, is just because you assume that one thing is true. In other words, a trade war policy or a protectionist policy from the White House is going to hurt somebody, the president and Republicans politically, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play out that way. Again, it's just anecdotal, but in speaking to people, the president, among his supporters, Neil, at least, has built up a lot of equity with tax cuts, with deregulatory policies, where that support seems to still be solid from the people who supported him in the past, and they're cutting him some slack and willing to see how this trade debate and trade discussion will play out over a matter of time. I've been a little bit surprised by it.
And as you've reported earlier as well, the Chinese offered a first opening salvo here to buy $70 billion worth of U.S. agriculture-related products here, so that could ease a lot of this angst if it turns out to be a concession on the Chinese part. There's been no follow-up. We'll see. Eliza, when you look at what's going on here, the view had been not too long ago that we faced a blue wave here. The Democrats were certainly going to gain a lot of seats, enough to tip the balance of power in either the House and or Senate. Less likely the Senate, still possibly the House. And then along came an improving economy, along came a startlingly good jobs report, and now they're not so sure. What's the latest read?
Exactly. The economy's improvement and the steady, strong economy has really helped Republicans. They feel good about their tax cuts, although they have not been, like, we've analyzed advertisements. That has not been the number one issue they've been talking about, which is a little bit interesting, but it's certainly helping them. There is concern from Republicans here at the Capitol about these impending trade wars, so much concern that they're actually talking about a bill right now that could basically give Congress the authority to vote up or down the president's proposed tariffs in the future based on national security. We don't know if that has enough votes right now, but it's certainly being discussed. And something interesting is Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has not ruled it out of being added, or at least voted on, a separate piece of legislation. So he's not stopping it, which does say that Republicans here are concerned about the effects of a possible trade war.
We should also mention, and she did, Shelby, this idea that Republicans, Mitch McConnell, are concerned enough about getting more stuff done that they're going to be working through the August recess, or at least that's the plan. What's the political fallout of that?
Well, politically, some of these Republicans will not be at home in their districts. That means less time on the campaign trail, meeting voters, shaking hands. But on the flip side, if they get a lot done and they accomplish things Republicans want to see them accomplish, it could be a good thing. So right now, kind of hard to say. I will say that it's impossible to know what will be top of mind for voters come November. The Trump presidency seems to change news cycles every hour, if not every day. But if the economy is top of mind, I was looking through some Wall Street Journal polls, and most voters feel that Republicans are in a better place to handle the economy, things like taxes, trade, the deficit. However, if an issue like immigration or healthcare is top of mind for voters, that could hurt the GOP. And I would add the question about a trade war throws a huge wrench into this, because if there is a trade war, and if most voters start to think that Democrats could handle the economy better, if they start to think Democrats would be better on trade, then you see this huge list of issues that most voters would feel Democrats are better on, and that could really threaten Republicans come November in the midterms.
All right, guys, I want to thank you all very, very much. Just a reminder here, the typical rule of thumb in these midterm elections is who's ever angrier will usually go out to vote. The ones who are more satisfied generally will stay at home. But if you're feeling better about things, that could mean there are fewer angrier. So the angry side that presumably would want to go against the incumbent party does not. And the people who are very happy with things maybe do consider going out and voting for the incumbent party. It's a rule of thumb that's been all over the map and not consistent, but we're going to see if it plays out tonight, beginning at 8 p.m. when Fox Business picks up our special live coverage of this, till whenever, in 8 crucial states that will have a lot to say about the direction not only of this race, but this economy, and whether Democrats can make good on a promise and a commitment to take back the House and maybe the Senate. We'll explore that from all angles, as well as get real-time world market reaction to these developments. If you think we're focused on this, you should see the attention this gets in the foreign press. We'll have more after this. Do you think when the president weighs in, as he has right now, to disinviting the Philadelphia Eagles to come to the White House, or some of these other ancillary issues, they get the focus off legitimate issues, whether people like Donald Trump or not, that kind of distraction, and he's known for doing this a lot, hurts his message?
I think it does. And again, part of why I wrote Trump's America is to pull together in one volume the good things that are happening across the board, whether it's energy or what have you. I think President Trump at times clutters his own message to his own disadvantage.
Proof positive, this whole Philadelphia Eagles thing today, that was the only thing reporters were interested in. Take a look.
Does he risk alienating key voters in that state by disinviting the Eagles?
This isn't about the national anthem. It's about so few players coming in the end. Does he bear zero responsibility for players like the Warriors and the Cavs not wanting to come and the Eagles bailing?
Is this about something more than the national anthem? Something other than the national anthem?
Look, if this wasn't a political stunt by the Eagles franchise, then they wouldn't have planned to attend the event and then backed out at the last minute. And if it wasn't a political stunt, then they wouldn't have attempted to reschedule the visit when they knew that the president was going to be overseas. And if this wasn't a political stunt, they wouldn't have waited until Monday, well after 1,000 of their fans had traveled and taken time out of their schedules to offer only a tiny handful of representatives to attend the event.
That was virtually all of the line of questioning. You know who spoke right before Sarah did? Of course, the top economic advisor, delineating all the good economic news we've seen. But again, it falls on deaf ears when maybe the president himself grabs onto some of these other events that might be perfectly valid, but again, get everyone's attention perfectly off the subject at hand, including an improving economy, which the president says fake news types don't report. Francesca Chambers, of course, at those daily sessions, the Daily Mail White House correspondent. Francesca, he curses his own message, does he not?
Well, and yesterday we saw something similar where reporters repeatedly asked Sarah Sanders about the president's tweets about whether the special counsel was unconstitutional or not for that to have been put in place. And so we have seen this several times. But to that point today, it's not necessarily true that if reporters hadn't been asking about the Eagles not coming to the White House, that the questions that would have been asked were things that the White House would have liked better. We also heard things in the room today about Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator, and fresh allegations that he may have abused his power in office and taxpayer dollars.
Is it your sense, though, that this whole football thing with the Eagles and whatever has, created a furor and a distraction at a time the president probably wouldn't like it, whatever the merits of his argument and people, standing for the national anthem, whatever. But he's a week ahead of crucial talks with the North Koreans. He does have a compelling argument to make about the economy, the markets, et cetera. And then this.
And you make a key point, Neil, about this summit with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. That's something else that we barely heard about today, aside from the fact that he'll meet on Thursday at the White House with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And didn't really have a chance today to ask about the president's tweet this morning about North Korea, in which he said that he hopes and expects that something successful will come out of this today, Neil. And so, again, though, sometimes the questions, however, wouldn't necessarily be things that the White House wants to talk about more, because we also saw the president, again, tweeting this week about that Russia probe. And that's something that Sarah Sanders also didn't want to talk about today, deferring questions to special counsel about that statement that the president may have dictated about his son Don Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lawyer at Trump Tower.
Obviously, that's galvanized all the attention, not so much economic officials when they speak, which is an economic reporter. I kind of bristle at, because I know people think I'm a nerd, and I know I want to listen to what nerds say. I don't need it shoved back in my face that you're so boring, Neil, we don't want to hear about it. But again, that's what economic advisors get, right? So he's going to try to make a compelling argument. Look at what's turning on right beneath you. But it's his boss himself that is distracting that attention.
Well, Kevin Hastert did say that he was going to try and cheer up reporters with some charts to try and make it a little bit more interesting. Got a little bit of a visual representation there in a pamphlet held out, Neil. But again, this is something that, as you heard Newt Gingrich say, and even allies of the president, that when he does some of these tweets, it does distract from the message. And we heard President Trump say, or saw him say on Twitter last week, that he was not going to focus on some of these things like Russia as much, and he was going to focus on North Korea and that summit a little bit more, and then has continued to tweet about the Russia probe since then.
All right, real quickly on this football thing. I'm beginning to think that when he got word that it was down to 10 or so Philadelphia Eagles going to this event, he preempted that, said, all right, this is ridiculous. And that was the catalyst, that it was such a small number. Am I right?
Well, Sarah Sanders also brought that up today. She said that there was going to be what she called a tiny number, we believe to be 10 to 12. We're going to show up out of the more than 80 who were originally supposed to come. And they cited that as part of the reason, in addition to the national anthem and the kneeling, as a reason that the White House called up this event, but also what they described as the Eagles trying to move the event to a time that was inconvenient for the president when he was scheduled to be overseas in Singapore for that summit, as a reason that this ultimately fell apart.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much, Francesca. Good seeing you again.
Thanks, Neil.
All right. In the meantime, who needs a summer vacation when you can work right through it to save your job? What Mitch McConnell is trying to orchestrate, that has even some in his own party saying, really? Really? All right, we already talked about Mitch McConnell's plan to keep everybody, at least the Republicans, in the Capitol in the month of August, during the typically otherwise 4-week August recess, where I'm a Republican senator, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, among many others, John Barrasso. Senator, is this okay with you?
Absolutely, Neil. I think it's an important thing to do. We've been dealing with historic obstruction, deliberate delays by the Democrats, just in terms of getting the president's team in place. So we want to be able to get more people confirmed. But additionally, you know, the president has been very clear. He's not going to sign another continuing resolution. We need to do individual appropriations bills. We have work to be done on behalf of the American people. And in terms of the so-called recess, like, you know me, I'm a surgeon. I'm used to working nights, weekends, long hours. I think it's where we ought to be and the work we ought to be doing for the American people.
How does that work, Senator? Now, obviously, Mitch McConnell is the majority leader of the United States Senate. Can he compel the minority party, the Democrats, to stay in session as well?
Well, no. Every senator makes their own decisions about when they're here or not.
Including your own colleagues?
Yeah, but votes are called, and you can either be there to cast your vote or not, to represent your state or not on matters critical to the country. And if individuals want to not be here, well, that's up to them. I'm going to be here doing the work. I know that Senator McConnell, as our leader, is going to be continuing on the floor, putting up measures for votes, for discussions, for debates, and ultimately for votes. And that's how we plan to spend August.
Are some of your colleagues concerned that this robs them of time to be out on the campaign? I mean, some of them are pretty vulnerable, not across the Senate, where the prospects are very different than House Republicans. But what are they saying?
Well, there are consequences to people's actions. And when you put that kind of delay deliberately on slowing down the president's nominations, we still have lots of work to be done. We want to get that work done. And if we haven't gotten it done so far, which we haven't, we need to make sure we get our work done in August.
Where do you see things going right now among your colleagues and the likelihood to visit another second shot at the tax cut, one that would make permanent rate cuts for individuals? I know Senator McConnell, when I last chatted with him, seemed to not be too keen on it. Maybe he was thinking that it would help some of those vulnerable Democrats who would get another shot at this, maybe vote for a phase 2 when they didn't for phase 1.
Yeah, well, Neil, I was home in Wyoming all last week over Memorial Day. There is a confidence and an optimism in families, in working men and women all around Wyoming because of the tax bill. What we've seen is they're keeping more of their hard-earned money because taxes are lower. Plus, they're seeing raises in their pay. Unemployment rates are down, which means people can wake up and know they have an opportunity for a job and to go forward. And the hope that comes from that, I would like to make all of these tax cuts permanent, and I'd like to work to that end between now and the end of this legislative session.
When you look at what's happening in the Senate, where it's very likely you guys could actually pick up seats, depending on how you want to look at the math, but a very different battle going on in the House, is it your sense that Republicans hold on, not only in the Senate, where, like I said, there's an argument to be made where you could pick up some seats, but in the House, that in some of these very dramatic races, the edge to Democrats isn't what was the case?
Well, the president's policies in terms of taxes, cutting regulations, unleashing American energy, very popular around the United States because the economy is so strong and what that means to working families and having more money to spend.
Well, it's not popular everywhere, right?
So
in some of the high-tax states like New Jersey, where there are at least 7 vulnerable Republican districts now, that tax cut is coming back to bite Republicans. Now, it might be playing out in some other high-tax areas. Are you worried about that?
Well, Neil, I want to make sure the president maintains his majority in the House and the Senate. The Senate races are the ones that I've continued to focus on. As you know, I'm up for re-election this year, as are a number of my colleagues, but I think we have great opportunities. And like you, I share the opinion that we have an opportunity to actually pick up seats to make it easier to get the president's agenda through the Senate, and that's what I'm working on through the fall.
All right, Senator Barrasso, thank you very much. Very good seeing you again.
Hey, thanks, Neil.
All right. Do any of you remember when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying before Congress and tried to lay down the new law here that there is nothing beyond what I'm telling you? Do any of you remember when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying before Congress and tried to lay down the new law here that there is nothing beyond what I'm telling you now that indicates problems or compromised data from anyone in this country? A big old oops for the rich guy who founded a company hoping that he would never encounter this type of controversy.
The truth is, the hubbub was I got hot under the collar because of the way the questions were asked. The suggestion was that I'd never apologized for what caused all the trouble for me 20 years ago. So the first point is, I did. I meant it then and I meant it now. I apologize to my family, to Monica Lewinsky and her family, and to the American people.
All right. The president is sort of getting a lesson in going on a book tour and not assuming all sorts of other questions beyond the book would come out on that tour. The president trying to dial back some of the comments he made in an angry exchange on NBC. But the fact of the matter is he did. And some Democrats are wondering, do we need this right about now? Democratic strategist Robin Byro, Fox News political analyst Gianna Caldwell, and the Washington Examiner's Emily Jashinsky. Emily, whatever people think about what happened 20 years ago with Bill Clinton, it's all coming back 20 years later. Is that a good thing for Democrats?
Well, of course, it's not a good thing for Democrats, and I think Democrats, especially in red states, know that. I think there's more willingness among blue state Democrats, people in Maryland, people in New York, to use the Clintons on the campaign trail. But think about this. If Bill Clinton is going to release a book and go on a publicity tour and campaign in the year of Me Too, in the Me Too era, he's going to face questions about Monica Lewinsky, of course. But now that the precedent has been set in that NBC interview, that's one part of a broader story when it comes to Bill Clinton, because he's got Juanita Broderick. He's got other allegations allegations of assault and harassment that he's going to face that will dog him if he goes out on the campaign trail for other people. So no, it's not good for Democrats, and red state Democrats should be running the opposite direction of the Clintons, especially Bill Clinton this year.
Well, red state Republicans and other, feel the same effect with Bill Clinton as they did with Donald Trump and vice versa. We live in an age where I don't know if this stuff resonates like it used to. Gianna?
No, I don't think it's the same. However, who would have thunk, who would have thunk that the Clintons, Bill and Hillary, will become the Republicans Party greatest assets? I mean, you got a guy who's been off his game since the 2016 election, who admitted that President Trump, or then candidate Donald Trump, was correct about the anxiety people felt, the economic angst that people felt. And those were a continuation of the Obama policies, years of the Obama policy. So when it comes to what he's doing, I've talked to Democrats nationally and both locally.
State Democrat, it's doing us no good. It's doing us about as much good as it did Hillary Clinton when he had that meeting with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac. That was the singular moment, the defining moment that I knew we had serious trouble on our hands for that campaign. And, I don't want to trample on his First Amendment rights to free speech, but free speech has consequences. Just ask Roseanne Barr. We're each responsible for what we say and do. And he's not doing the party any favors right now.
When you look at this battle and you think of what's happened since the emergence of the Me Too movement, Emily, and everything else, there's enough blame and questionable behavior to go around, and some questionable conduct to go around, where no one should be pointing fingers at anyone. But be that as it may, does this neutralize a worry that Republicans had about their own president, comments he's made? It's all a soured lot. I mean, that's a bit of a generalization, but people just shrug their shoulders and say, all right, whoever is in charge, are they helping me out, whatever they are morally that I might or might not like?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely accurate. There's really been no partisan bent to Me Too, and I think that's one of the most depressing things about it, right, is everybody is equally guilty. People in both parties have done despicable things and have mistreated women horribly. And so, yeah, I don't think specifically there's a partisan benefit to either side when it comes to whether the Me Too allegations against certain people hurt a party, help a party. But I do think in specific races where the Clintons are trying to target their efforts, you could absolutely see Bill Clinton coming into the local news market and just being